Hello, folks. Welcome to the thousands of you around the world. This is Dangerous Ideas. Thanks for joining me. This is the show, the only show in the world where we reveal the truth. Now, that might be a bit egotistical of me. Maybe there's other shows. There's a few. But thank you for being here. And today I am going to get into the top most insane stories of 2023, of the past year, everything that went down that we should be talking about. But of course, I'm going to give a bunch of commentary on it as well. I am getting the list from blatantly stealing from my friend Ben Norton, who has put together a great list over at Geopolitical Economy Report. But I'm going to, give you a little extra on each topic that is not in the description, and we will be chatting about that. And feel free to add in the comment section other stories that I might not be getting to that you feel fit into the list of the most insane stories of 2023. And when I say insane, you know me, I'm not talking about just like, oh, crazy lady in Florida did a Florida thing. Now, I'm not saying you can't read about those. They're a good time. But, of course, I'm talking about the most pivotal stuff in the world, the destruction and death and sheer annihilation of all that is holy and real in this world by the U.S. empire. And when I say U.S. empire, I mean as well Israel, many countries in Europe, etc. So, that is the bulk of it. There are a couple of stories that fit outside of that category, but in general, though, many of the stories fit there, and the reactions to the U.S. empire and the hegemony that the U.S. empire is trying to hold on to this entire past year. Hopefully, 2024 will be better. What do you think? It's already started off like shit. It already sucks. But maybe it'll get a lot better. Maybe this will be the year. Maybe this will be the year that we actually create a sustainable and peaceful world, a world where we don't obliterate each other so that 12 people can get richer. I mean, when you really break it down, it's like 12 people. So thank you all for being here. Please make sure to hit subscribe and thumbs up and all those good things while we get into this. Let's see. Got that going. And we will also, of course, discuss as we go through this why or what aspects of these are not getting talked about in the mainstream media, and perhaps even on some of them why they're not talked about in the mainstream media. But for many of them, kind of the general story is talked about in the corporate media, in the mainstream, in the allowable propaganda outlets that have banned me for my entire life. Many of them talk about kind of the umbrella story. They will, but will, of course, get to what it is they do not want you to know or do not want to reveal to you, etc. Okay, let's dive right in. But as I mentioned, this is the list is coming, and much of the research is coming from Ben Norton over at geopoliticaleconomy.com. Number one, and I'm sure you're shocked that this is number one on the list of most insane, most horrific stories of the past year, but is Israel's genocide against Gaza. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I spend just about every live stream on that nowadays. It's sadly, it is so pivotal and so disgusting and so horrific that I have found myself spending most of these live streams the past 3 months on this topic. But of course, more than 20,000 have been murdered in Gaza, a historic human toll. And that headline is from the Washington Post. I mean, they don't say murdered. That's my word, but because they have to euphemize it slightly. But they say more than 20,000 dead in Gaza, a historic human toll. Israel has turned Gaza into one of the most heavily bombed areas in history, not in the region, in history, according to a report in the Financial Times, which Washington Post and Financial Times both far right wing when you consider the entirety of our society and world and the viewpoints therein. These are far right wing outlets. They may be considered liberal in American politics, but it's still right wing. It still endorses U.S. propaganda and U.S. war states. But even these outlets are saying things like this is the most heavily bombed area in history, one of the most heavily bombed in history. According to a report in Financial Times, 2/3 of Gaza war dead are women and children. As I've been saying, it's more like 70% are women and children, and those numbers are far greater than the percentages you would normally see in modern warfare. More UN workers. This is from the Wall Street Journal, another right wing neoliberal outlet. More UN workers killed in Israel Gaza war than in any single conflict in history. Israel is committing atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. And even these organizations are not even clearly, many of them are not even clearly calling them out on it. The UN talked about how, put out a report on how they'd had more workers killed in this conflict than in any conflict in the past. And it's only been 3 months. They put out a report on it. And in that report, and I covered it at the time, they didn't even say who killed them. They just said more killed in Gaza than, and you're like, guys, these are your own workers being murdered. It might be time to name the assailant. It might be time to name who's doing it. But yes, so as I said, whereas I normally spend probably about 75% of all my live streams now on the Gaza being perpetrated against genocide. Sorry, it's one of those days. The genocide being perpetrated against Gaza. I am not going to do that on this show because we are trying to get into all of the stories that are the top stories of 2023, the past year. And yeah, so I'm gonna move on. But normally, as many of you know, if you want more on the genocide being perpetrated, please go to one of my pages, youtube.com/moment of clarity or rumble.com/leecamp. Anyway, number 2 on the list, NATO fails to defeat Russia in Ukraine. And there's some interesting aspects of this. For one thing, we have I don't know if I want to jump ahead just yet. I'll just go through them as he has them here, but there's many interesting aspects of this, some of which have been covered up, some of which have not been as covered up. But the U.S. is slowly but surely backing out of the proxy war in Ukraine. The U.S. government, the sociopaths at the top have gotten part of what they wanted, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, severing ties between Russia and Europe. They've gotten part of what they wanted. The other things they wanted from the proxy war in Ukraine that they haven't gotten, they're not going to get, so they're moving on. But this is interesting. From the New York Times, a commando network coordinates the flow of weapons into Ukraine. And I found the most interesting aspect of this. Hold on, let me show you this article. And this is New York Times. So this even has busted into the neoliberal corporate media world. But the thing I found most fascinating about this, stealthy network of commandos and spies rushing to provide weapons, intelligence, and training, according to U.S. and European officials. Much of this work happens outside Ukraine at bases in Germany, France, and Britain, for example. But even as the Biden administration has declared it will not deploy American troops to Ukraine, right? We've gotten that promise, no boots on the ground in Ukraine, right? That's what we've been told. Some CIA personnel have continued to operate in the country secretly, mostly in the capital, Kiev, directing much of the vast amounts of intelligence the United States is sharing with Ukrainian forces, according to current and former officials. So the U.S. doesn't have boots on the ground, but the fucking CIA is there. That sounds like boots on the ground. What, CIA doesn't wear boots? They wear loafers? Loafers on the ground? Is that the difference? Really? Just because it's slight, just because they don't have as big guns? Just because they might not be quite as dumb as your average grunt? They have a necktie on. Well, that doesn't count as boots on the ground. It's boots on the ground. You have CIA in Ukraine coordinating things. Now, I'm not saying I ever for a moment thought they weren't there, but I'm just saying it's been revealed. They, at least certain levels of the administration or the Pentagon or the CIA, are admitting to this. So it sounds a lot like the U.S. is stage managing this. And I've brought you throughout the year and a half this has been going on, or almost 2 years, I've brought you other revelations as to how the U.S. has been stage managing the proxy war in Ukraine, which, again, those of you who study this stuff or pay attention to this stuff are not shocked about. You're not going, oh my God, the U.S. has influence in the proxy war. I get that it's not shocking, but my point is, when this information comes out, it's important to show that it has been revealed, that it has been confirmed, and of course that your mainstream media is never talking about it, with the exception of, an occasional article like this, which an occasional paragraph hidden in the New York Times, and then they never mention it again. Oh, hey, CIA in Ukraine, managing the proxy war against Russia. Forgot to mention that. Forgot to ever talk about that again. Thank you, New York Times. Let's see. Let's see what's next on the list. Next on his list. So this is to continue about NATO failing to defeat Russia. The Economist says Putin seems to be winning the war in Ukraine for now. The Telegraph says Ukraine is losing, but the UK should stand by it. Ukraine, this is from Ben Norton himself. Ukraine war is frozen. No territorial changes expected, says Council on Foreign Relations chief. So again, these are higher ups in the U.S. governmental system, and they are admitting that the Ukraine war is frozen. Even the New York Times brought you a map of the changes in territory in the Ukraine war, how much has gone, how much has changed for, gone to the Ukrainians, and how much has gone to the Russians. And it is, if you look at it on a map of Ukraine, it is centimeters. It is nothing. People are dying for nothing in terms of the amount of ground exchange. And of course, we know, and Ben Norton puts it in here, that many top-level officials have admitted that the West sabotaged the Ukraine peace deal with Russia. A Zelensky official, one of his top aides, has admitted that. And this peace deal was 1 month into the conflict. So this would have ended things about a year and a half ago, before they even really got going. You would have millions of Ukrainians not having their lives destroyed. You will have hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians still alive, and Russians, if this had been allowed to go through. But the U.S. made sure to stop, to get in the way of that peace deal, and it never happened, even though it was about to be signed. The former head of Germany, former Chancellor Schroeder, said that is the truth as well. So many have admitted to that. Okay, so moving on to the next topic of the most insane stories of 2023. And feel free to vote in the comment section what you think will be what else will be on this list, or what else you think should be on this list. But let's talk about the anti-colonial uprisings in Africa's Sahel region. A lot of anti-colonial uprisings, either actually physically with force or via economics. There's been a big shift, a big growing for a rift in the rift in the global economies has grown significantly. But this is anti-colonial uprisings. The U.S. and France have threatened intervention to reinstall a pro-Western regime in Niger. You remember, of course, when Niger had a military coup and threw out their French rulers. I mean, of course, it was an African president, but he was French-backed. And they threw out the French. French troops were first forced to withdraw, as well as American troops were forced to withdraw. This follows coups led by nationalist anti-colonial military officers in West Africa. Burkina Faso's new president also condemned imperialism, quoted Che Guevara, allied himself with Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. That was in Burkina Faso. In Niger, the people of Niger, a canvassing by Premise Data found that 78% of respondents support the actions of the military junta that perpetrated the coup that brought down the French-backed president, and that 73% thought the junta should stay in power for an extended period or until new elections are held. So you see a lot. There's been a lot of anti-Western, anti-colonial uprisings, but that's all the while growing global inequality is another major story of the past year, and I'm sure that's going to end now. That's the global inequality is going to be nice and even now. Richest. This is from. Well, this is also from Ben Norton. Richest 1% took 2/3 of global wealth since 2020, twice as much as 99% of the population earned. The richest 1% took 2/3 of all the new global wealth created since 2020. And much of that had to do with the pandemic, using the pandemic to pump money to the richest Americans and richest people in the world. The U.S. monetary supply was increased by 20% during the pandemic. This is called shock doctrine. You use catastrophic global events or catastrophic national events to exploit them and make the rich even richer and the poor even poorer. And man, did they do it during the pandemic. Richest 1% to 2/3 of the global wealth. I mean, it is tough to overstate the global inequality. To add my own thoughts here, it really is. These numbers may be a few years old, but I remember that 50% of the world makes less than $2 a day. Of course, many of them, the bottom, whatever, 20% is probably, less than 10 cents a day or something. But 50% of the world makes less than $2 a day. And of course, you have the top 1% that are making just totally mind-blowing amounts of money that you can't even consider. And it's more money than any of them could ever spend. It's absolutely atrocious. But this is the gravity of capitalism. And I've tried to stress this a lot over the past year, 2 years. This is the gravity of where capitalism brings people. And I get it's bigger than capitalism. It's actually market economics as a whole. But capitalism is the most unhinged level of this. And the gravity, you may have things that put in blocks for a little while. Workers win a little bit of a better deal in their contracts, or some safety nets, or some retirement plans that are helpful to people, or you give people health care. There may be some little things that you throw in that are very important. I don't mean to minimize. I've done segment after segment after segment on how important it is for Americans to get free health care, universal health care. But so these things are important. But when you throw in those blocks to the rushing torrent of energy that is capitalism, it will always rush around those blocks, those obstacles eventually. It may take a few years, but eventually all those safety nets and things get gutted and the inequality just shoots up like a hockey stick curve. And we're seeing that. We're seeing it it feels like fast forward, but this is the gravity of capitalism. And it is the gravity towards the destruction of our planet, as we've seen in so many ways. Climate crisis being just one of them, but of course the amount of plastic waste, the amount of garbage in the world daily. We use enough. I always have a tough time remembering the exact numbers on some of these, but the U.S. uses, I believe it's enough plastic bags per day to cover France twice. Like, it's just ridiculous amounts of plastic. And by the way, I believe we should do that, cover France with plastic bags. We should laminate France. No, actually, I like a lot of France. I did not like the leadership of France, but I like a lot of the workers. It's nice how they actually stand up. They, shoot manure onto the presidential palace or presidential housing. The French, I don't know if there's any better protesters in the world. They do some beautiful shit. They spray some beautiful shit on the president and his house and their parliament, etc. But the inequality, and of course, inequality has all these other ramifications that we don't often talk about, or we don't often connect. You have the amount that you have, of course, that inequality causes ill health, causes early death, premature death, which is one of the worst things you can get. Premature death, dude. I caught premature death once. It's the worst. Um, I see someone mentioning in the chats that the Jeffrey Epstein names are coming out, which I certainly will be bringing you hopefully Thursday. But yeah, I didn't know when they're supposed to come out today. I didn't know, whether there'd be enough time. So if they are out, I apologize that they're not in this live stream, but I will be covering them soon. The numbers, the names of all of Jeffrey Epstein's other clients that have been hidden for many years. Anyway, global inequality continues to rise. Moving on, most insane stories of 2023, the BRICS expansion, the growth of BRICS, which could help save us to some degree from the just gut-wrenching destruction of U.S. hegemony. BRICS expanding into economic powerhouse, petrodollar under threat. In its South Africa summit, BRICS invited 6 new members. Most of you know what BRICS is. It is a global group of countries that are creating an economic system that is separate from the dollar-owned system and really competing with dollar hegemony, which makes a big difference in terms of the power of the United States, but not just the United States, the power of Western interests to control this world. BRICS invited 6 new members: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Although I think Argentina has said they're out of that because they have put in a far-right lunatic president. Anyway, the bloc now represents 37% of global GDP, 40% of global oil production, and roughly 1/3 of global gas production, challenging the U.S. petrodollar system. BRICS is now 40% of the global GDP. That's crazy. This used to be something that the U.S. almost exclusively owned. The BRICS blocks, and of course, it goes without saying that when you go outside of the dollar or when you're inside the dollar, these things give the country that runs them or the countries that run them immense power to influence other countries through a carrot or a stick approach. The U.S. usually uses stick approach. Basically, we will, not give you the money you need for your loans, or we will not, allow you to develop if you don't, vote with us at the UN and do whatever we say. And it is immense power to have the economic control of other countries via the, global reserve currency, the US dollar, the petrodollar, or the reverse, BRICS. BRICS so far, it seems, has largely used a carrot approach. We will work with you. We will help you. It's kind of different from the way the U.S. approaches these things. The BRICS bloc's new development bank, an alternative to the U.S.-dominated World Bank, is de-dollarizing its loans, promoting local currencies, and adding new members. Speaking of de-dollarization, calls to move away from the U.S. dollar are growing. But the greenback is still king, and that comes from CNBC. Okay, so that comes from the U.S. propaganda outlet. But even they have been forced to admit that calls to move away from the U.S. dollar are growing. And of course, this is significant to creating a world where we can actually find some sustainability, when we actually can get to a place where you can not have a collapsing planet as an operating system. The global de-dollarization campaign is gaining momentum as countries around the world seek alternatives to the hegemony of the U.S. dollar. China, Russia, Brazil, India, the ASEAN nations, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are now using local currencies in their trade. And they used to not have the power to do this. Every country, especially really the countries that had some sort of power in a region or oil power, but the countries that would step outside of the dollar, they were invaded or collapsed by us, by the US. We're talking Syria, Iraq, Libya, and of course, we've been trying to collapse Iran for years. Venezuela, we've been trying to coup and collapsed. And in fact, we did coup Venezuela. Unfortunately, it only lasted for a couple of days. I mean, unfortunately, jokingly. When Hugo Chavez was couped by the United States and then got back into power because the people demanded he return. The dollar suffered a stunning collapse in 2022 in its market share as a reserve currency. Okay, so quick refresher. Really the two things that give the US dollar the power that it has so that the US government can print as much money as they want and never seem to have any problem with it. If they want $1 trillion, they just go boop, $1 trillion. The reason they can do that without the dollar becoming completely worthless is really two reasons. One, petrodollar. Much of the world's petroleum is sold and bought in dollars, and the dollar being the global reserve currency. Countries put their extra money into dollars, US dollars, because they know the US dollar is stable and they don't want to have their extra money in something that is unstable that could collapse. But those two things are linked, the reserve currency and the petrodollar. If the reason that these countries are putting their money into the US dollar as a reserve currency is because the petrodollar gives it power and stability. As those things start to fall, as fewer countries are buying and selling oil or oil is getting used less, either one, as that goes down, the reserve currency will go down with it because countries will realize there's other currencies that maybe are good places to store their money. So those two things are linked. So if one collapses, the other will collapse likely. And we are seeing a significant decrease in the use of the US dollar as reserve currency. The dollar suffered a stunning collapse in 2022 in its market share of reserve currency, largely due to US sanctions. That's one of the reasons. Falling from 73% of reserves in 2001 to 47% in 2022. So it was 73% of global reserves were kept in US dollars in 2001. Now that is down to 47% of global reserves are kept in US dollars. That is a huge difference. According to economist Stephen Countries in the global south, Stephen Jen, according to economist Stephen Jen, countries in the global south are seeking economic alternatives in a multipolar world. Now, the reason they say it's due to sanctions is that the U.S. has put so many sanctions on other countries and stolen some of their funds in the case of Venezuela and Russia, that many countries are going, oh, perhaps having our money in dollars is a bad idea because it gives the U.S. a lot of power over us. And so that has caused many countries to move at least a portion of their money outside of U.S. dollars as the reserve currency. Okay, let's keep going. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen admitted to CNN that Washington's unilateral sanctions on countries around the world could undermine the hegemony of the dollar. Inflation and federal interest rate hikes were another major story of 2023. The U.S. Federal Reserve says its goal is to get wages down. I've discussed this many times, although much of my discussion of it was before Israel started on their serving up hot cups of genocidal. But what the Federal Reserve is doing right now is actually trying to create a recession, because a recession knocks people out of work. Those workers are then willing to take jobs with less power, making less money. So it takes power away from workers and puts power in the hands of massive corporations. That is the goal of the Federal Reserve. So We're told the Federal Reserve, this magical entity in the United States, is meant to keep things stable, is meant to keep things in such a manner that Americans are served well by it. But they've actually admitted that their goal right now is to decrease worker wages and power, which you would think would cause the average American to go, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I want them to work really hard to cut my wages and power. But instead, we rarely hear this uh, discussion even had. And that was from the Federal Reserve Chair. Jerome Powell said, goal is to get wages down. And this also links into the fact that 2023 was another major year for U.S. worker strikes. This year and last year, or 2023 and the year before, worker strikes were the most worker strikes in a generation. And it has to do with workers have power right now, more than normal. They have the ability to fight back and demand more. And we're seeing them make gains in many areas. The auto industry, the what is the one where where people walk out and they go, I'm pretending I'm this other guy. Oh, Hollywood. That one, a lot of industries where these people have fought back and received big gains. Hollywood writers, which who would have thought there were writers in Hollywood? I mean, have you seen the shit they're bumming out? Somebody's writing that. That's right. I know. I was shocked too. I was like, I honestly believed that, Steven Spielberg just kind of, wiped his ass and then fed it into a teleprompter. But no, apparently someone writes that stuff. Greed, the Guardian says greedflation. Wow, tripped over that word 3 times. Greedflation, maybe because it's not a word. It's made up. All words are made up. What? Greedflation, corporate profiteering significantly boosted global prices. Study shows multinationals in particular hiked prices far above the rise in cost to deliver an outsized impact on the cost of living crisis, report concludes. So it turns out that it's not supply chain issues or something like that that is causing all of these crazy increases in prices that are, destroying people's lives and causing 2/3 of Americans to live paycheck to paycheck. It's not that. It's actually that corporations just realize now's a good time to be as greedy as possible. Awesome. Again, this is the gravity of capitalism, the gravity of market economics. This is where the system goes. It goes to more and more greed. It goes to more and more destruction of the average people's lives. That is where it goes. There is no consideration for the future beyond next quarter. There is no consideration for clean water, clean air, life expectancy. None of that is factored into the equations that make up capitalism. Capitalism is about profit. It's about profit and product. That is it. And we see that this is where the gravity flows every time. And here's my hope for AI. And I will talk a little more about AI in a few minutes. But my hope for AI, and I know that AI is to some degree controlled by its inputs. However, AI is now training itself. We're getting to the point that you don't really input things. You train the AI to go through all the information it can get and train itself. Now, of course, this is incredibly dangerous and may kill us all. But before that happens, before the kill us all moment of the AI, I'm hoping that there are some AI systems out there that start looking at the systems outside of the capitalist parameters. They start looking at the system in terms of, well, what is best for human beings or what is best for the environment. And we are very close to having AI models that could very reliably say to you, and, I don't know if they'd have standard computer voice. Hello, person, here's what will happen. It is sad we've gotten rid of that voice. And it's sad that AI doesn't just, I think we should keep the computerized voice just so we can all, tell the difference. But we're very close to having models that could say, look, if you have capitalism running in a system of over a few thousand people, here's where it will always end up. Or you could put in the precise inputs of the size of the country, its resources, etc. And the model could say, oh, they will destroy all of their resources and eat themselves alive in 25 years. And it could give you a very reliable response to that. Now, of course, you could also do the reverse, right? You could have AI you could have an AI model that says, here's exactly how to live so that you don't destroy all your resources, so that you have the most number of people in comfort. And we live in a post-scarcity world. If we actually distributed resources, and if the term distributed resources scares you, guess what? Market economics is a way of distributing resources. So all of that is resource distribution. Of course, it's a way of distributing resources so that the rich get almost all of them, or a large outsized percentage of them. But anyway, if we had a way of distributing the resources so that everyone is comfortable and not starving and not thirsty and not, unable to get proper clothing or housing, we could do that. Like, we have the resources. That's what a post-scarcity world is. And so there is a great hope for what AI could do. Now, there is, I think, a reasonable argument to make that the oligarchy, the richest people in the world, the most powerful people in the world, will do everything they can to make sure we don't see those models. We don't see the models that say, oh, you will exhaust all of your resources in the next 25 years. Or the planet will be 900 degrees 100 years from now. All of that is, I'm sure they will work very hard to try and cover all of that up. But anyway, I will talk more about AI in a few minutes. Another major story. By the way, in a few minutes, we will be going to just rumble.com/leecamp. That's rumble.com/leecamp, and it is free to watch there, as well as my locals page. Everything for those watching on Rumble or on locals will remain the same. But I do beg of you, I am one of the most suppressed and censored comedians, commentators on the web, at least in America. And I beg of you that you go to rumble.com/leecamp and click the follow button. It's free. Click the follow button and then click the little bell icon. Do that for me. And go to youtube.com/moment of clarity. I think it's also youtube.com/@realleecamp, either one. And click the subscribe tab and then click the bell icon. If you do those things, it would be awesome. And it would really help me out because I am so suppressed. My latest platform to get completely banned on. I'm trying to, let's see. So this is ignoring all shadow banning. I've lost my TV show of 8 years. I had my YouTube channel with 250,000 banned around the world. I had my podcast banned from Spotify. And I have now, as of 2 weeks ago, had my TikTok banned. And that's not including shadow banning. But all of those are erased. Like, can't post anything ever. So yeah, that's just the banning. That's just a full-on banning. So please do click the follow. It's free. Click the follow and click the bell icon. Just do that for me. Oh, one other thing you can do is, that's free. Go to leecamp.com. A pop-up will come up asking if you want to join the email list. If you do that, emails tend to get to people far better than these other garbage outlet things. So please sign up for the free email. And obviously you can unsubscribe at any time. So if you decide the one email a week is bothering you, then you can unsubscribe. But please give it a chance. Go to leecamp.com and wait for the pop-up and then put in your email. Free to do. Okay. I'm going to go to Rumble in a few minutes, but I'll keep going for a second. There is a debt crisis in the global south. This is from France 24 the G77 plus. So this is 77 nations. G77 plus China summit in Cuba calls on the global south to change the rules of the game. The G77 plus China, a group of developing and emerging countries representing 80% of the world's population. Did you hear that? These countries represent 80% of the world's humans, and they got together In Cuba, the representatives, not all 80%. That'd be too many. I think that would actually sink the island of Cuba if they all showed up. But the representatives got together in Cuba and kicked off a summit that called to change the rules of the game for the global order. This means 80%. This, I'd say, with one exception, which I'm getting to in a few minutes, with one exception, this is probably I will say the story of the year in terms of implications for humanity. The story of the year in terms of sheer atrocity is probably the genocide against Gazans. But the story of the year for implications for all of humanity, I think this is number 2 on the list. And I will get to number 1 soon. But number 2 on the list of the past year in terms of implications for all humans is that 80% of the world's population is in countries that have decided they are not down with the U.S. empire, with the Western hegemony, with a system that exploits 80% of the world's population in order to enrich 20% of the world's population. And them having the power and the foresight and the effort and the ability to get together and do that is new. They may have had some of these thoughts before, but they now have the power and the ability to make a difference. And they are standing up. And I think we will see implications. And of course, this is all linked in with BRICS. BRICS is kind of part of this, but we will see implications of this continue to spiral down as the next year goes on and hopefully change things for the better, decrease the exploitation around this world. I am not saying it's a cure-all. I'm not saying everybody's going to be, just living on peaches and cream and dandelions. But, if we're talking percentage of positive change, it could be a big percentage of positive change. Someone mentioned Yard Rock in the comment section. Thank you, Brandon, for bringing up that, yes, one of the most important stories of 2023 is that a literal rock is running for president. It's a rock I found in my yard. I'm the campaign manager, yardrock2024.com. Real website, yardrock2024.com. Check it out. You'll see everything the Yard Rock stands for. And if you buy one of the pieces of merch, 50% goes to eliminate all medical debt as well. Maybe not all, but eliminate some of the medical debt in America. Yeah, for those of you not in America, medical debt is a thing. What the frickety frack? Yardrock2024.com. Okay. Like I said, I'm getting to the most important in terms of implications for humanity story of 2023. That's coming up, but so many other stories are coming up as well. Join me at rumble.com/leecamp. Free to go over there. Rumble.com/leecamp. That's rumble.com/leecamp. Join me over there.